Good morning, I'm ED-SKaR and I'm back in sunny Milton Keynes for another one of my tournament vlogs because we have Wargames Workshop, another tournament run by the Outriders MK. Now I've had a thought with the tournaments that I don't just have to come and play and enjoy them, although I do enjoy them. What I can also do is try out some interesting things. And so today I've brought along a medic, and medics are one of those things in bolt action and sort of a lot of war games that don't really get a lot of use. And I want to do a video about this specific topic, but in preparation for that I need to actually play some games, and so the tournament gives me the perfect example. But for the moment I'm going to go off and have breakfast, and I'm going to pass you back to my future self where I will talk about the army that I have brought.
Here we are. Again, we're using a slightly smaller points limit, 800 this time, and I've already made a video about why I like these kind of small or mid-sized games, so I'll spare you the boring deep dive on that and just point you to my previous video. I did say that I brought a medic specifically because I want to test how they work, and I have a second lieutenant of course and a sniper. To give the medic the best opportunity to do their work, I brought two full veteran squads, one with rifles and two light machine gun teams, and the other is just all submachine guns. Both of these two squads have two Panzerfausts as a just-in-case measure. Naturally, there's also the free rifle squad that comes along for the ride, and once again I'm bringing ED-SKaR, the armoured car, the Ampulomet's mortar and ZiS-3 divisional gun. Lastly, a model that I've always wanted to bring is the Katyusha rocket truck. This takes the same slot as the tank, and it's usually hard to justify a 60-point model instead of a 200 points tank when playing larger games, but in this smaller game it is the perfect time to take something that is a little bit more fun. And so I finished up breakfast and headed out to setting up one of the boards, because I do like to help out with that sort of stuff, and we got stuck in to our first game. And my opponent here is a brand new player to tournaments. Having only played a few games of bolt action before, I had the honour of welcoming them into the group, as I have been welcomed a few months ago. And they seemed like a really nice person who enjoyed a very fun game as much as I did. They played a veteran British force with a Churchill heavy tank, and we played an objective based game with 5 objectives all over the board, reminding me that I keep forgetting to bring those nice objectives that I made a few weeks ago. Almost as soon as the game started, I hit one of his squads with my Katyusha, wiping it from the board, and then my Ampulomets targeted their Churchill, which is a full half of the points limit for this kind of smaller game, and it needed a 6 to hit, which it got. And it's got a special rule that on a 6 it sets the targets on fire, which it also got. So almost as soon as we had shaken hands, me and this brand new player, and said good luck for the game, I'd taken more than half of their army off of the board. Oops. But this actually quickly turned as their own mortar got a 6 on my armoured car, blowing it from its axles. And the middle of the board has some tough fighting, with one of their veteran squads fighting off one of mine and my free rifle squad as well, fighting hand to hand and fighting hard. And the free rifle squad ended up just going down in front of the ZiS-3, blocking its line of sight for 5 out of the 6 turns of the game, rendering it effectively useless. And ultimately my opponent held that middle objective all the way through the game. Very well done. Over on the right flank was just some sporadic fighting that didn't really achieve very much, aside from each of us holding one objective that we sort of started off with. And it's only right at the end that I bring back my medic. The veteran squad that they were supposed to be looking after had been completely wiped out, and they took an objective that just swung the game in my favour. This was tense and surprisingly close all of the way through, and only in the last turn was it decided. And it was good fun. Unfortunately, that means that my testing the medic idea didn't work at all, as all of the casualties were pretty much caused by close combat, which medics can't help with, and so all they did was take that objective. The second game, a classic table quarters, as a civil war versus another Soviet player, and one I've played against before on the channel. This is a fairly aggressive infantry-only force with lots of tricks up its sleeves, as the player was going to a more competitive event in a few weeks' time and wanted to test out their list. My medic and submachine gun veterans had to cross the street with a sniper and several light machine guns aiming down it like a bowling alley, but they just about made it across and made a nuisance of themselves before being taken out. And my medic just wasn't close enough to help, as they only have a 6-inch effective range. The 3 rifle squads managed to stay out of the way of my ZIS-3 this time. Not that that meant anything, because a paratrooper squad landed right on them and took it off of the table. And on the right flank, all of these infantry squads rolled up, and I just wasn't able to do much against it, not with sniper, ampule mortar, Katyusha and BA-64 combined, and the points here ended fairly close, but I just wasn't able to hold back this waves of soggy farmers who were all over the scoring quarters.
So the third game that I'm about to talk about was probably the most fun I have ever had playing any war game ever in my whole life. But to fully explain why, I am going to have to start talking about rules, which I try to avoid. Usually when I'm doing these vlogs, I just want to pick out some of the highlights of the game, some of the fun bits, and that's about it. I don't really want to delve into the rules because that kind of gets very slow and boring. But in this game, my opponent had picked a very, very particular army, taking advantage of a very particular rule. Kind of the core part of how bolt action works is that every unit, every vehicle gets 1 order die, and you put all of the order dice in a bag and you randomly pick. And so you might get 1, your opponent might get 1, you might get 2 or 3, or your opponent might. And so moving a unit actually takes some thinking. You can't just run everything forward all at once, because if you run 1 unit, well, your opponent will get to, maybe they get 2 or 3, and so they shoot down your unit, and then your next one comes along and the same thing happens. So you have to kind of look after each other's units and be a bit more tactical. However, the officers, usually a lieutenant, have a special ability called Snap to Action, where if there's a unit nearby, they can say, I'm going to snap that unit from... and you pick an extra order die. You just pick it out without picking it randomly. You just pick one out, give it to that other unit. Now that's usually not particularly kind of valuable. So what most players do is pick a second lieutenant with 1 snap. It's not very effective, but you have to have a lieutenant, and so you just pick the cheapest one and you kind of just don't use the ability. However, my opponent in the third game today picked a first lieutenant, and with the German special ability, that means that officer gets 3 snaps. And they picked a major for another 5 snaps, a higher ranking officer. And so with 10 order dice in their army completely and 8 snaps, as soon as they pick 1, they pretty much can just roll their entire platoon in one go. And it's not how this game is supposed to be played at all. My opponent had no respect in the slightest for the way the game is supposed to be played, and it is utterly hilarious and just absolutely ridiculous. All 3 of their games today were just over in half the time of anyone else's, because they moved, the opponents got just handed the dice bag and says, well, they're all yours now, off you go, kind of thing. But not only that, but some of the specific things that happened during the game are also quite a bit ridiculous. And so let's carry on and talk about the game.
So straight away, my Katyusha got line of sight between the buildings on one of those small infantry squads, which means it hits everything close by and actually managed to do a lot of damage, wiping 1 squad and damaging a second. And the ZIS-3 also landed a hit and got a few casualties there. So far so sensible, but things went crazy pretty quickly. This whole blob of snaps just charged forwards all in one go and shot up everything in sight. But because this is early in the game, all of my units were still in cover, and so it didn't really do much. And the only casualty near the medic was an exceptional success, and that has a special rule which the medic can't affect, and so there was no roll there. By turn 3, I had taken out 1 of those 2 officers, bringing their strategy to a crawl and forcing them to very nearly play the game properly. My Katyusha struck out again, bringing their right flank down to just a handful of models. The Katyusha did hit their medic, but didn't take them out. And now this. This is where things struck me. This is a mortar spotter on the roof, in heavy cover, small team, and down. And that means that shooting at him is pretty much a waste of time. So the only real way to deal with that is to get into close combat. This building is 2 floors and a roof, and so it takes 3 turns to get up there, and that's one of the rules in bolt action that I really don't like. And so I sent my Leytinen up, 2 models with submachine guns. They should take out 1 loser with a pair of binoculars, right? Well, no, because after 3 turns of climbing stairs, they missed all of their attacks, took 1 wound in return, which means they lose combat, and are wiped off the board. And almost immediately after this, back outdoors, I charged my veteran submachine gun squad into my enemy's medic, and exactly the same thing happened. No wounds caused. The medic did 1 wound in return, meaning I lost combat and the squad was wiped. In fact, at the end of the game, my opponent had a single model left on the board, this blasted medic, who ran into my objective. And because this was the take a single objective mission, that would have won him the game if I couldn't take him out, this one lone model. And so I poured everything into it. The sniper and the remains of the Ziz-3 were out of line of sight, the rifle squad couldn't quite move into position, the BA-64 drove up and shot him in the back of the face at like 2 inches range and missed everything, and so it was down to my ampule mortar, the last roll of the game, and finally I managed to take out the last model, and is one of the very few times that I have tabled an opponent, and only because they were being very, very silly. It was a roaring fun game, likely the most fun game I have ever had of all time. 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10, would swear at medics again. And that does bring me back to the medic that I had brought with the specific intention of testing medics, and I did not learn anything. In the first game, they had no opportunity to use their ability. In the second game, they were just too far away, and in the third, they only rolled a couple of times, and because it's a 6 to be successful, it just wasn't likely to happen. But maybe that is the reason why not so many players bring medics. It's just too hard to keep them close by to be useful. Their effect is quite small, it's only 6 inches, and there are so many ways to negate it, like high explosive, snipers, close combat, and other things that medics just can't save people from. Maybe I should try again and use a medic in a different way, and I do have a bit of a plan for that. But anyway, for now, this game was great fun, as were the other 2, and overall I came in 4th out of 8 players, which means for the first time I have come above the halfway point, which means obviously I'm improving and getting better at the game, and definitely not because there were new players and people being silly, kind of throwing matches by just not taking it seriously. I'm going to take it, I came above half. And of course there was a raffle at the end of the day, and I won an M10 tank destroyer. And that's actually quite interesting, because when I was building my British force, I was strongly considering an M10 tank destroyer until I decided on a Sherman and the Cromwells. And then when I built my America force, again I was looking at an M10, the Wolverine, but I decided to go with the Stuart light tank instead. And now I've won an M10 Wolverine, which means that I maybe should have just waited and won it. But it's a fun thing to have, and I'm definitely going to enjoy building it. But that's kind of me rambling now, so thank you everyone to watch along. And this is your monthly reminder to go find some people to play with, because playing games is a lot of fun. I'm ED-SKaR, always will be. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.